The following video tutorial is by digitaltoolsforarchitects.com, the architect's source for tutorials, techniques, tips, and tricks.
Hello and welcome to Illustrator tutorial 3.15. This is creating a clipping mask from a live paint object. As you can see, I've already opened a document that contains a nice perspective drawing here. This was originally an AutoCAD file, and when I've opened that using the File Open command, I've opened an AutoCAD file, and I'm going to look here quickly at the layer stack, and you can see that this particular layer contains one larger object, which is called the block record here, and a series of lines that make up that object. Now, I'm not particularly interested in keeping this as one object. I'd like to work with each of the lines or paths individually, and to do that, I'm first going to select the first line here in my layer stack, and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom list of my lines here. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to click the end line, and that's going to select everything in between the two. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this outside of the block record here. And so I'm going to click, hold, and drag until it shows up just under layer 1. And when that happens, I now have a series of individual objects. And you can see that I can select each of those lines individually or paths individually. Now, with each of those selected, I'm going to go ahead and close down this layer. So I just have layer 1. Now, before I begin, I'd like to rename this layer. So I'm going to double click on the layer 1 here. And when I do that, I'm going to select it, and now I'm going to name it Base Drawing. And once I've done that, I'm going to select OK, and now the name has changed to Base Drawing. Now, before I move on, I'd like to have a duplicate copy of this base drawing, because with a duplicate copy, I can end up using the lines separate from the live paint group that I'm going to use in a second. So I'm going to create a duplicate copy. Now, there's two different ways I can do this. One, I can click on this shortcut menu, and I can say duplicate base drawing, which creates a copy. The other option is to click and drag this to the new layer icon down here at the bottom of the layers window. And in either case, I will create a base drawing copy or a new layer copy. So I'm going to rename this so that it's not base drawing copy anymore. So I'm going to do that by double clicking on the base drawing. And when I do that, I'm going to call this live paint object. And once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and select all of the lines here. Well, actually, before I do that, I'm going to turn off the base drawing layer so that that's just off and preserved for later on. And I'm going to drag a box around all of my objects. And there's a couple different ways to do that. To select all the objects, I could drag the box as I just did. I can also press Command A or Control A on a PC. When I do that, I will have selected all the objects, and now I can click the Live Paint Bucket tool, which is in the tool palette on the left-hand side here. Now when I click the Live Paint Bucket, I want to first assign a fill color, so I'm going to flip the fill and stroke colors because I don't want a stroke color, and this gives me a black fill color. When I'm working with live paint, I like to have a brighter color that I'm filling with, so let's pick a nice bright green here. And now I'm going to go ahead and click on the object, and I'm going to fill in each of the regions here. Now once I've done that, I'm going to look up here at the top and click the Expand button, and that's going to create separate objects out of each of those regions that I just painted. I'm going to use the white arrow or the Direct Selection tool, and when I do that, I'm going to click off so that nothing is selected first, and then I'm going to select just the individual object that I want to work with. I could pick any one of these colored regions. In this case, I'm going to pick this Z-shaped wall because it's a little more interesting than the other walls. So, doing that, I'm going to open my layer stack again. And I can tell that this object that I just selected is in fact on the live paint object layer. And I can tell that because there's a nice little box next to the live paint object layer. Now I'm going to move this object onto a new layer, so I'm going to create a new layer using the new layer button here at the bottom of the layers window. And when I do that, it's going to create layer 3, and I'd like to change the name of this layer, so I'm going to double click on layer 3, and I'm going to change this to wall 1. And I'm also going to change the color to a different color just so we can see a contrasting color here. So I have wall 1. Now I'm going to move this object onto wall 1 by dragging this little square onto the wall 1 layer. So when I drag it onto the wall 1 layer, this object has now moved from the live paint object layer onto the wall 1 layer. At this point I can turn off the live paint object group and I'm left with just one object defined by one path. So if I expand the wall 1 layer, you can see that there's just one path and one object. So at this stage I need to bring in the texture that I'd like to create a clipping mask with, and so I'm going to go to File, Place, and when I go to File, Place, I have a nice limestone image here that I'm going to use. I click Place, and the image that comes in is ridiculously too large for what I need it for, so I'm going to go ahead and use the Object Transform Scale tool, and we'll scale it by 10%, and that's going to make a nice small object that I can work with. Now it's a little bit on the small side. Let's see. No, it'll fit. Okay, so if I look at my layer stack here, I have the wall 1 layer, and on the wall 1 layer is a linked file. A lot of times on the PC this will show up as image rather than linked file, and I have a path. Now I want to change the order of these two so that the path is on top of the linked file. So I'm going to drag the path up above the linked file in this layer stack, and that's going to show the path and then the image behind. So what's going to happen is this path here will clip this image behind, and the image will only show up in this green area. So now that I've done that, I want to select the wall 1 main layer here, and I can use the shortcut menu to select Make Clipping Mask. Now when I make a clipping mask, you can see that it did in fact do exactly what I was asking it to. It used the path, the Z-shaped path here, to clip the textured object that I have behind. Now if I go ahead and turn back on my other objects, you can see pretty easily that this is a great way to texture objects, especially when the shapes are complex. So this is creating a clipping mask in Adobe Illustrator.
That's it for this video tutorial. We hope you enjoyed it and learned from it. Please check back with digitaltoolsforarchitects.com for more tutorials, techniques, tips, and tricks.